So earlier on the show, we talked about Ghana's finance minister, that's Ken Ofori-Atta, having to defend the domestic debt exchange program in Parliament. And so we have Emmanuel Amoah-Darkwah, who is an economist and partner at advisory firm C-Kadd Global, joining me from Ghana to look at this issue. And of course, what the finance minister had to say and what was the eventual perspective that the parliamentarians put forward. Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So we are wondering why the Ghanaian parliamentarians were skeptical about the DDEP, about that program. Was it as a result of lack of understanding of the program, or they actually do not trust the exchange program?
I will not say it's not about trust, but as leaders or as representatives of Ghanaians, they've not had opportunity to be briefed on the full program. You remember that the 2023 budget was presented in November, and in December, Parliament had to go on recess, and so they came back just about 2 weeks ago. So they've not had the opportunity to be briefed on the details of the program. And the program was launched on 5th of December, and it has undergone a lot of deadline changes. And so it was an opportunity for the Minister for Finance to come and brief Parliament. And more importantly, there are some stakeholders, especially individual bondholders and also pensioners, who are still not convinced with the terms that the Ministry of Finance is offering them in terms of this debt swap.
Now, according to the finance minister, Ghana during the pandemic received substantial financial assistance, but then there were issues with poor revenue coming in because, of course, the businesses were in lockdown, and there was high expenditure, and the government having to pay so much to support households and other little businesses just to keep them afloat. And the finance minister said that widened the deficit to about 14.7% of GDP in 2022 and 11.4% in 2021. Some people are actually not in tune or not really in support of the figures. So we'd like to know if those figures were correct, and of course, if that was enough to actually reduce Ghana's liquidity.
Yeah, it's correct, but it's unfortunate that we keep on saying that Russia-Ukraine war and then COVID-19 are the things that exacerbated Ghana's high budget deficit. But I must say that even before 2020, it was clear that we were recording high budget deficits, and as a result, public debt was going up. I had the opportunity to do some research work for an institute even in 2019, trying to look at Ghana's revenue and expenditure in the past decade. And it is clear that our revenue has not been performing, but at the same time, expenditure has been going high. So in the past decade, we have recorded high budget deficits, which also fits into public debt. And so COVID-19 and then the Russia-Ukraine war just exacerbated the problem that is already existing. And it has become a perennial problem that we are not raising a lot of revenue. At the same time, expenditure is going up. And so it is true to some extent, but the problem existed even before COVID-19 and then the Russia-Ukraine war.
All right, let's quickly address one of the statements that Ken Ofori-Atta made mention of. He said an internal debt sustainability analysis conducted revealed that public debt exceeded about 100% of GDP, while debt servicing accounted for more than a half of total government revenues and almost 70% of tax revenues. So the question is, when the government discovered that it was borrowing so much and it knew that it couldn't pay back, the government knew that it was already crossing the threshold, it was crossing the line. So why didn't the government stop borrowing at that particular point? Was it expedient for the Ghanaian government to continue borrowing when it knew that it was already crossing the red line?
Unfortunately, because of the fiscal space at the time, you realize that in Ghana's budget, 3 expenditure items consumes almost everything. The first is interest payment, which for 2 years, consecutive 2 years, it has been the lead expenditure item, followed by compensation to government employees, and then payments to other government units or statutory payments, we call them. And so you cannot do anything about compensation to government employees because government cannot afford to default on paying public sector workers, which amounts to about 640,000 people on the payroll of government. So the thing that government can do is to look at how best they can restructure government debt, hence the call for restructuring. And I must say that this restructuring, it came as a result of us applying for a bailout program. On July 1, 2022, government made an official call to the IMF to look for or to see how best Ghana can get a funded program. And so as a result of that, government had to do what we call the debt sustainability analysis. And the report was clear that Ghana's debt was unsustainable. And as you mentioned in the statistics, if you add statutory payments and then compensation to government employees, it amounts to more than 150% compared to our revenues. And so this is quite unsustainable. Hence, government had to, look at how best they can restructure their public debt.
All right, thank you so much, Emmanuel. We would like to revisit this topic some other time, but then we appreciate your presence within the short period of time.